Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Drennan from Merge Inclusion Consultants. So happy to be here with you all for National Inclusion Project's Power Play Conference. I believe this is my 8th or 9th time attending, and it's just such a wonderful time of year to have everybody who is so committed to inclusion gathering together with this wonderful organization. Honored to be here today with you. So let's get started. Disability inclusion includes all staff. Strategies for getting your team on board. All right, let me share a little bit about what we'll be going over today with you, and introductions and setting the stage. I'm going to define inclusion, talk about the principles of inclusions and models of participation, just to get everybody on the same page. What's next? Let's talk about organizational commitment, right? We're really going to take a look at that, your staffing structure, creating that culture of change and sustainability. And then we're going to take one by one some hurdles that you might be experiencing in this area and solutions to go along with it. Let's talk about getting our staff buy-in, right? Bringing together all of our staff on board, your existing staff and any new staff that you might hire on our inclusion train here. And then top tips for overcoming those hurdles. And then, of course, a little time for wrap up, and let me start with introductions. Again, my name is Lisa Drennan. I've been working in the field supporting folks with disabilities to reach their wellness and enrichment goals for just about 39 years. First as a direct support professional, and then as a recreation director, and I oversaw a wellness center where I worked. It was a community for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities in Pembroke, Massachusetts, and that's where I'm from today. So in 2014, I became the director of inclusion at the South Shore YMCA. So a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is exactly what I experienced when I took on that role, right, as director of inclusion and helping our Y to become more inclusive. So you'll see a little bit of a tie in there. And that's what led me to start Merge. Began in 2018. I primarily work with recreation, camp, and sport, any community organization seeking to be more inclusive in their practices. So that brings me here to you. So let's set the stage today. I want to start by telling you a term that I'm going to use, and it's called diverse abilities. And I want to explain why I use that. So if you think about a group or a class or a camp setting or a team, a group that you are in charge of, right, that you are offering something to, we're going to assume that several within that group, or many, may participate, learn, or experience the world differently, right? This may be impacted by a physical or learning disability, psychiatric disorder, medical complexities, mental health condition, right? Non-apparent or hidden disability, 70% of disabilities are non-apparent, or intellectual developmental disabilities. So look at all those different ways. Again, a person who maybe it may impact how they learn, how they participate, how they experience the world around them. And I want us to think about the whole group and how we teach and how we offer what we offer so that everybody within that group can be successful. All right, the second term I want to be clear on. I'm going to point your eyes all the way up to the top right-hand part of the graphic here, and you'll see a gold circle with a variety of colored dots and also white dots. Inclusion, right, is what when I speak about inclusion, I'm saying that where we create spaces and events and groups that you take the existing model and you welcome in and include in persons with and without disabilities. We'll take a look at this in more detail, but I wanted to make sure that when I say the word inclusion, I'm talking about everybody all together. You may have experience with thinking about specialized or integrated or unified. Those are all ways that we provide support and services, but inclusion is what we're ultimately working toward. So talking about inclusion, let me just start by, sharing this. Inclusion is not a staff member, right? It's not a program. It's not an event. It's a commitment shared across your organization, your whole organization, to ensure all are welcome, engaged, and meaningfully participating. The weight of inclusion cannot solely fall on the shoulders of an inclusion staff, inclusion specialists, CTRS, okay? It's organizational commitment, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So here are the 6 principles of inclusion. I'm going to go over this rather quickly because I'm providing you a handout that'll come along with it, with these 6 principles of inclusion. Alrighty, so let's get started. Here's that handout. If you're more a QR person and you want to take a snap of that right now and download that, it'll also be available through National Inclusion Project. All right, here we go. Number 1 principle. It takes organizational commitment. That's what today's training is all about. So we're really going to get into details here. All stakeholders have a responsibility and role. And then we have to provide resources and support at all levels. So that's really important to understand that. And at your rec program, your camp, your organization, your after school program, all staff, everybody should be able to understand and can share with members, community members, what inclusion means at your organization. Number 2, there's meaningful participation. So not just physical proximity, instead we're focusing on participating together. All right, it's very intentional work that we do. We have to think about this and figure out what are the best ways to help include everyone, right, in every different situation. So intentional work we do to ensure that every individual is meeting their goals. And this is so important. It really focuses on the premise that everyone has something of value to contribute. So we're strengths, right? We're strengths focused, not deficit focused. So strengths focus is what we're looking at. Meaningful participation, number 2. Now, number 3, we meet people where they're at. So we're okay with, right? And we absolutely promote that we change systems to support the person or to support our whole community as a whole. And we do this by making accommodations and modifications. And we're okay with doing that, right? We understand that success is individualized. Okay, so we really want to create that space where we meet people where they're at, and it's okay. We'll change things. We'll change the way we offer a game or an activity. We'll change the way that we our policies and procedures to help make sure that we're inclusive of all. Number 4, we're always working towards full inclusion, right? I want to take you back to that models of participation. We'll go over that in a minute, but we want to support a person to be as independent as possible and the least restrictive environment. So what does that mean? If you do have adaptive or specialized programs or supports in place, they should always be a gateway towards helping a person to become more independent and move toward full inclusion in as many spaces and places possible within your organization or community. Okay, so those adaptive or specialized program, they're that gateway, right? Maybe an introduction, a way to help someone move towards full inclusion. It's not the end of the road. Alrighty, could be different for different activities too. We want to keep that in mind. Someone may need full support, one-to-one in an aquatic setting, but in this art class, they're fully independent, and that's great. Number 5, let's get to success. So this is our mindset that we have, and we try to help others to have as well. It's a change in our perspective or approach anytime we are faced with any kind of challenge or a situation around inclusion. Instead of approaching it with, no, we can't do this, right? We take a deep breath and we say, how are we going to do this? And when we put that positive kind of problem solving approach forward, we're going to be more successful with inclusion. All right, so we want to also tap into resources, and we want to explore, how do we get to yes, right? Yes, we're going to make this work. So we all work together to help inclusion work. And number 6, and I'm sure if you are, no matter who's on this call today or listening to this presentation, I want you to think about your mission statement wherever you work. I am sure there's a piece in there that says that you are supporting your whole community. Everybody, right? Everyone belongs. So everyone has a right to be welcomed, engaged, and supported. And we know there's so many reasons, values, benefits, opening your doors to all types and dimensions of diversity. But we're here today regarding the dimension of diversity around disability or ability level, right? And the ADA, or the American with Disability Act, ensures that persons with disabilities have a legal right to participate. All right, so that wraps that up. Again, inclusion is not a staff member. It is not a program. It is not an event that you have. Those are all pieces that might help inclusion to happen, but inclusion is organization-wide. It's about intentionally planning for the success of all. So let's get into one more look at what inclusion might look like if we're to look at this journey here. First, there's, access. Can people, they welcome to your program, your camp, right? Your after school program. Yes, access, right? Then there's inclusion. Are we working to make sure that people have the opportunity to be side by side with their peers, meaningfully participating? Check, right? I'm sure everybody here, we got that. But I want us to move this goalpost over. And I want you to look all the way over to number 3, belonging. This is the new inclusion, all right? Belonging is the new inclusion. And we want to really create spaces and places and a culture where somebody has the opportunity to make a friend, right? And to really feel like they belong. So if they were missing, somebody would say, hey, where's Roberto? Right? Wow, he's not here today. That's belonging when someone is missing that they're really missed. And that's what we really want to work on creating in our programs. Alrighty, so a quick look at these models of participation. Okay, we're going to go into detail on the more popular models for camp. And the reason I'm doing this, it's really important to understand if there's differences here, how our staffing structure and what we want to be moving toward. Alrighty, so back to this. Gold is a group, a class, an event, right? A team. White is our community members without disability, neurotypical. Colored dots represent our community members with disability or neurodivergent. How someone with a disability participates relative to their non-disabled peers is what I call a model of participation. And you see the 5 here: exclusion, it happens. Specialized or adaptive is usually another word that can be switched out there. Integrated, unified peer body, or inclusion. So we're going to take the 3 more popular ones that you might see, let's say, in a summer camp program. All right. Oh, little point here. How someone participates, always their choice, right? We don't say, oh, you have a disability, you go over here. You don't, you go over here. Every person should have a choice and be knowledgeable about all the different types of programs and offerings and support that you have. All right, so another handout for you here. I'll give you a couple quick seconds to QR code that, or you'll have access to it through National Inclusion Project. All right, let's take a look at specialized. All right, so this is disability specific. This may be confused sometimes, and people may say, oh, we have an inclusive program. It's just for individuals with autism, right? So a couple of examples of specialized might be autism swim, wheelchair basketball. Perhaps you have a social skills class or cooking class for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities, right? Specific disability-specific programs. They're offered with instruction or participants provided in separate environments, right? Designed to respond to a particular various impairment. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this is called specialized or adaptive, and that's how we would want to label that if we're providing it for the general community. And next one is integrated, right? And you'll go back to that 5-step chart. And this is somewhat of a step up, meaning that we're looking to have least restrictive environment and decrease our supports needed whenever a person is ready. So integration would be, maybe you have a traditional camp and you have 1 staff, right? And they're assigned 2 or 3 campers, and those 2 or 3 campers have disabilities or diverse abilities, and they are kind of tethered to that person. They might start their own group, but then go in and join everybody for morning circle. Then they kind of have time on their own, and maybe they join for lunch, or maybe they join for swim or a different activity, but they are definitely tethered to their staff and moving along in those circles, and that's where their support comes from, that individual staff. So this is integration. It's a process of placing participants with disabilities in existing activities. A focus is on giving the participants support. That's the support that they have so that they can fit into the existing system. All right, so this might be how your staff might be utilized, or you, if you're an inclusion specialist or TR, right, that you are used in this way, that you provide the support for individuals to go into particular groups. Perhaps that's how your programs run. And then inclusion, right? And this is where we want to be. This is the model, the space we're referring to when we talk about authentic community inclusion. This is where individuals will experience belonging, right? Community membership and in the community to have a valued role. All right. And this is what it takes intentional work. So we're supporting all participants, instructors, staff, right? Everybody. This is what we're looking for. And the system as a whole, so that the full range of participation needs can be met. So focus is on the good instruction, development of good instruction. So right back to diverse abilities, I'm teaching in a way that this whole group is going to be successful, because I'm assuming that everybody learns differently, right? Participates and experiences the world differently. And here's the kicker. Attention in this area. If there is a barrier, a hurdle comes up, a little oopsie, a challenge in your day, inclusion model, what we do is we focus on how are we going to fix this? All right, that's where our energy goes. Let's look at this barrier in the system and what is preventing it from meeting the range of different levels of ability. So that's what we want to focus on. And that's what inclusion would be having us do, us all working together, right? To ensure that we're meeting the needs of all. So the system changes to meet the needs of all. Really important for me to share these and help you as we go into the next section, identify where do you fit. That's why I wanted to go over these different models. All right, so I went over what inclusion is. Now, how do we make this work? And this is how you make inclusion work in camp or rec settings. And it's the in all, for all, by all approach in all settings. So we use inclusion strategies and we think inclusively in every single setting, to the red group, to the blue group, to the morning and the afternoon, to the year-round and summer programs, to employees, volunteers, your community members, everybody, right, in all settings. For all means that we use strategies for everybody. So when I do a training with a group, I'm showing you my 8 strategies, and I'm suggesting you use it for everyone, not just, oh, everybody with a disability or everybody with autism, come on over here, right? No, we would just use them and practice them for everybody, because inclusion strategies are great for all. And then by all means that everybody, not just your inclusion staff, your identified TR person or your therapeutic rec, or, oh, you are now our inclusion specialist, so you do inclusion. No, everybody does inclusion. So I'm going to try to teach you how to get there. So now that we're in agreement, we want to look at where you're at. Where do you fall, and where do you need to be? So that's what we would want you to consider. All right, so let's get started. What's next? Organizational commitment. Let's look at your staffing structure. What do you already have in place at your organization, and how can we get to that organizational commitment? So what will this look like, right? Again, the in all, for all, by all. We want a little emphasis here on that by all. How do we move from it just being one person's responsibility or just these 3 or 4 staff identified to being everybody's responsibility? That's what we're trying to do today. So consider, do you have inclusion specialist, CTRS, inclusion techs or aides, right? Employed in your rec or camp program as well, right? So are we thinking not just your staff, but meaning who you serve, but do you have these positions in your setting, in your rec or camp program? Right. So now you kind of have a sense of where you're at. So now let's take this one step further. Relative to organizational commitment and your inclusion initiative, are you more towards specialized programs, right? Or versus we're in full inclusion, or combination of the both? And here's my little message here to everybody. No matter where you are in this journey, it's okay, right? Whether you're starting out, maybe you're doing all specialized or adaptive, but you're, just learn like, oh, wow, we could be thinking about inclusion in all aspects of our program. So no matter where you're at, it's good. This is a journey, and we all meet each other on this journey and help each other along. So do you have more specialized programs, and that's what you think about when you think about inclusion, or are you more toward a fully inclusive model where everybody is included in everything? Are you and I'm speaking to you, inclusion staff, specialists, aides, techs, right? TRs, therapeutic rec specialists. Are you doing inclusion, or are you more in a consulting role, right? So is it everything's thrown on your plate, like, oh, they do inclusion, and not, are you helping others to learn how to do inclusion? So we want to think about that. And do they rely solely on you? So this is relative to your staff. Are they always calling upon you to solve every inclusion situation? Or is there full organizational commitment and they are attempting to solve things on their own? All right, so now you're kind of getting a sense, where do you land? Right, no matter where you land, we're going to help you to continue on your inclusion journey. So, how your organization should use these positions. If you do have these specialists and inclusion staff on board, CTRS, right? If they're on board with your team, wonderful. And if you don't have any, don't be afraid. Don't be like, oh boy, I'm not in a good position here. That's okay too. Okay. So no matter where you're at, if you're even thinking of hiring an inclusion specialist, where would we be at? Okay, so next step. All right, we want to be moving less towards specialized programs, more towards inclusion, right? Not saying we can't have specialized program, but they have to be used in the right way. We want to move away from you're doing all the inclusion versus, or one person's doing all the inclusion versus a consulting role, right? And then finally, we want to give the onus to the in your entire organization, not that you are the only one doing, they're relying on you to do inclusion, but there's organizational commitment. So that's where we want to be headed. All right, now we're on the same page there, right? We're thinking about our staffing structure. How is it set up? If you are one of those inclusion staff, what is your role? You kind of have a better idea of where you're at, maybe where you'd like to go, right? If we want to create that culture change and sustainability, where are you headed? All right. So now let's talk about, okay, Lisa, you painted this nice picture of organizational commitment and everybody is doing inclusion, and that sounds great, but there's some hurdles along the way, either that you've experienced or, to be honest, you might experience. All right. So we want to build that foundation and frame. How do we get there? Right. Again, more towards inclusion, more towards a consultant role, more towards organizational commitment. Think about, right? I want you to think about, what hurdles have you experienced? And I'm going to share a bunch here today. We don't have the interactive piece in this particular presentation, but I would like to invite you to take note of what I've pointed out, some things that people have shared with me or that I've experienced, or if you have a different hurdle, send me a note. I'd like to add it to my list. All righty. So here's some hurdles that have been experienced. We don't have one of those positions. Okay, right? We don't have a specialist who does inclusion. Staff don't feel like it's their job, right? The other staff, camp counselors, other staff, it's not my job. Don't we have somebody who does that? Specialists not confident that typical staff can work with this population. So maybe you have the background and experience and you're just not at that place where you feel comfortable that other staff without any background or experience can do this, right? So maybe that's where you're kind of feeling that might be a hurdle. We tried inclusion before, but had a bad outcome. Remember that kid 2 years ago, right? And that can be a hurdle. Maybe you're hearing that from other people as well. And that could be a hurdle. So we want to overcome that. We have only been focusing on specialized programs. Oh, wow, I see what you're saying, Lisa, but we only have specialized or adaptive program. Great, you're at a great starting point. We're going to continue on, right? But that might be seen as a hurdle for some. Traditional staff are not trained or qualified, right? That could be a hurdle, right? No, they don't have that background, that qualification. So we'll tackle that a bit. No clear understanding from the top. Perhaps you come from an organization and they've, created this position for you, or they want you to be more inclusive, but there's not really a clear understanding from their point of view. This could be a president, board of directors, executive director. So from the top above you, there's not a clear understanding of what inclusion is. They think, oh, we hired that person, we're all good. Now we can write on a brochure that we're inclusive. Doesn't really happen that way, right? We'll talk about that. Parents, family members, right? Individuals prefer specialized or adaptive spaces only. That could be seen as a hurdle. That might be their comfort level. Okay, we'll tackle that. We've been looking at it as a checkbox item, right? Sure. Oh, we had the training every year. We sat for 2 hours and listened to so-and-so speak, check, check, check. But we haven't really been doing that work to make the changes towards organizational commitment. Maybe that's a hurdle for you. Staff turnover. Oh, we train them and then they leave, right? We have to keep training them. So we want to think about culture and how do we make it part of the culture and not just a one-time training. This inclusion takes too much time. Maybe that's a perception that you or other people have had, and that's kind of a hurdle, that there's this idea that it's just too much time or resources that need to be in place. Okay, so other hurdles that might, didn't make my board here today, but creating policy and procedure, right? That just takes too much time. Following along that one, right? We want to think proactively. Do you know what else? It takes time and it's consuming. This is how I might respond to that. Issues that come up, right? Dealing with maybe angry parents or challenges or staff dissatisfaction. Those also take too much time. So we want to kind of counter that there. Anyways, let's start looking at the solutions or steps toward full inclusion, authentic inclusion, consulting role, not doing, organizational commitment versus relying only on our staff there. All right. What do we need to happen? We need to have staff buy-in. Has to be this way. This is how we start, is by getting our staff team on board and them understanding that this is part of your role too. So let's take a peek at the ever so important staff buy-in. All right, let's talk about these hurdles that we just came up with and try to solve them with some solutions. And let's get started. Getting staff buy-in. Let's start with this hurdle, right? Not understanding what inclusion really is. That very might well be what you might be experiencing. So we want to make sure that these 6 principles of inclusion are shared and understood, and all staff should know and understand these principles, right? So how can you work to consider these when making decisions about any aspect of growth, about your policy and procedure, about handling situations around inclusion? All right, again, just an opportunity. It's that summary sheet from before, the resource sheet. But let's start by really embracing these 6 principles of inclusion and making sure they're shared with your team and that they understand them as well. And this is the goal. This is where we're headed towards. That's number 1. Let's start with our next one. Conduct an inclusion audit. All right. Now, this might answer our hurdle of, we're doing inclusion, aren't we? We have special programs, right? So maybe that's where you're at and you're thinking about. And what we want to do is really do an inclusion audit, figure out where you're going, where you're at, and if, what are your strengths? What are you doing really well? What are the areas for growth? And how are you using your inclusion specialists would be number 1, if you do have them. And again, no worries if you don't. It's not imperative that you have an inclusion specialist, just so long as someone is leading that everybody should have a role in inclusion. All right. If you need help, you can reach out here. I'm a certified inclusivity assessor through Inclusive Recreation Resource Center. So basically, we want to figure out where you're at, right? And this should be an assessment on all levels, from your top, right? Executive directors, everybody who's the big executive team making all these decisions. The middle, those of you who are kind of in the middle running programs or directors, and then boots on the ground staff. We want to be looking at all those areas. Be clear on your expectations. So this would answer that hurdle of not understand they're responsible for this. What? That's not my job. Don't we have somebody who does that, right? Or low performance or refusal. Right? I shouldn't have to take these kids in my group, right? I don't have any background. They need specialists or one-to-ones, right? Maybe that's a hurdle that you're experiencing now. So for your staff team, here's what we want to be doing. And now point out for new and existing staff. We'll take this in 2 pieces here. We want to make sure it's clear in your job description, right? Everybody, so there's no question. So that would be more for your new staff, your job description or your onboarding process, right? Evaluate the language to make sure that it best supports the expectations of all, right? All positions with regards to disability inclusion. So you want to be very clear right from the start on your onboarding as well. As people are being hired, are we using that language like everybody, right? It's everybody's responsibility. We're committed to inclusion of our community members with disabilities. Now, for existing staff, we'd look a little bit more at goal setting and performance evaluations, right? We want to assess your appraisal process. Take a peek at that. Are there elements in there of disability inclusion and how to enhance your inclusion initiative for every position, not just your inclusion staff, right? So inclusion staff should not even be a word, right? After this training, everybody, someone may be more of a specialist in help guiding or be consulting in that role, but everybody's an inclusion staff. If they don't know that, if they may not be doing that if they're not being measured on those areas. So goal setting and a performance appraisal. Okay. And here's where I like to have this difficult conversation that, hey, you know what? It might be just what needs to happen if you've been very clear in your job description, your onboarding and your goal setting, and you've worked with staff members and they're still not on board and they're not using inclusive principles and practices. If they're refusing, it just may not be a fit for your camp or your rec program. Alrighty, so our next one, we want to grow our tribe, and this answers the hurdle of buy-in isn't strong, right? This can't work. Have you ever heard that? Like, this can't work, right? Maybe somebody had a bad past experience, and so they have in their mind that this isn't going to work. So you want to identify and grow your base. Who are those champions that you want to draw upon and help grow them, right? Everybody knows you got one or two out there, maybe hopefully more, that are really into it. They get this, they're responding, they're shaking their heads in the audience. Those are the ones you want to kind of connect with, and you want to, right? I know where my champions are. And then you want to praise what you want to increase. Okay. So if something's going really well and a staff did a great example of an inclusive practice, or really helping somebody to understand how to create that culture, right? Or did something really good, say that out loud in your meetings, right? That's a great thing. You want to praise what you want to increase. So make sure those staff are knowing this is exactly what we're looking at. Fantastic job on figuring out a way to make sure everybody was successful in your aquatics class. Boom, right? All right, here's a little bit of advice I want to share with you. Have some patience. This is a dial, not a switch, right? We're slowly changing culture. It's not going to happen overnight. So every little small step and every little success and every one or two staff who gets on board, it's a step in the right direction. Keep going, right? Dial, not a switch. All righty, my favorite part, provide inclusion training, right? And this can answer that hurdle, right? Respond to that hurdle. I don't know how to do this. This is in my, in my wheelhouse. I don't have the expertise in this area. And truth be told, and this is where I like to share, you don't have to have specialists to welcome, engage, and support folks with disabilities. What you have to have is an open mind, right? And a mindset of we can figure this out together. Just add that in right there. So we want to have trainings at all levels, right? Customize it. You wouldn't do one training for everybody in your entire organization. You might on some basics, but we want to think about, customizing it for our leadership. Are we really making sure that our leadership team understands what inclusion is and what needs to come next? Maybe a leadership roadmap, right? Our supervisors have a different role than boots on the ground. So we want to be speaking to them about implementation, right? Different divisions too, how you would train aquatics versus before and after school, or, maybe if you're have a YMCA that might have fitness programming. You might want to be training your staff at the membership desk a little differently than you would those who are providing one-to-one assistance on our health and well-being floors, right? So think about, so you want to give your team the tools and the confidence and the resources. Maybe you create an inclusion binder with all kinds of tips and strategies and show how to use inclusion strategies. So you might, if this feels overwhelming, just start with the basics. Maybe, disability etiquette, right? And you start at that point and you grow from there. Don't leave out our contractors. If you're hiring someone and they're coming in and they're teaching a STEM class or some other, specialty, they need to be on board too, because those are often the face of where our community members are seeing your organization. So we want to make sure there's language in their contract to your commitment to inclusion, number one, and how it relates to their expectations and to the, we comply with the American with Disabilities Act of including everybody. So another point that I want to make here, that if you are having inclusion staff, this is something I've noticed in the past, inclusion training, that, I've been to places and all the camp staff are all, at their tables and the little circles and little areas, and we're doing this. And then I've noticed inclusion staff like off in the back or way, kind of not involved, or maybe they're thinking, oh, I get this, I understand, I'm going to go do some work back here. It's important, if you are that in that specialty role, inclusion staff or specialist, that you are right side by side with the peers that you're going to be working with and being part of the conversations and training. So make sure you don't disappear when those trainings are there. You're actually having a voice, and you might even be part of offering that training as well. So, be part of it. Okay. This is what creates sustainability. All righty. So our next one, inclusive strategies for all, right? Maybe this is answering that question about inclusion staff aren't confident that typical staff can do this, right? I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable, I can just place so-and-so in that group and know that they can do that. All right, great place to start. Let's start breaking down that particular hurdle, right? We would start by using inclusion strategies for all. Remember that for all part, right? So you want to give those tools, right, and directions. Maybe it's on using visual schedules, for instance. Now you start having everybody learn how to use them, and everybody's using them in all groups, right? The expectation is that we have consistency with these. You can't allow, well, the red group's going to be using them. They're awesome. They have a great staff there. Blue group decided not. Their staff doesn't believe that this works, right? The expectation from the top is that everybody's using them. Okay, so let's take it one step further. We also want to be sure that we're gathering their feedback on how it would be best worked. So a quick example, one of the camps that I used to oversee, we had all these boards and all these wonderful things, and everybody got a kit. And then I think it was 3 out of 6 of the groups, they were in the field, and they're like, we can't carry this big thing around. And if we had just asked them ahead of time, we would have sorted out that they needed a smaller magnetic board. Could have been solved, but I was making the assumption that here, I'm going to give you all the tools, but we should be asking them. All right, here's a suggestion. We all use visual schedules or expectation lists. What will work for your group? And that way they're going to have buy-in, and they're going to feel like they're part of this decision. All right. In some ways, you're kind of like disguising that these are all these little strategies we're using are part of your procedures. Okay. And it's really important, again, that consistency, because when staff see it's being done in all groups, they're less likely to decide like, oh, this isn't for me. It should just be the expectation. Build up staff confidence. So this is to address that hurdle. They always rely on me. They never try it on themselves by themselves, right? So I want to make pretend you're the inclusion specialist here, and you have a traditional camp staff that we have a situation, they call you, come down, and you are, typically maybe you just take over and take that person and take care of the situation. I want to suggest a little bit a different approach here, that you are thinking about consulting, not doing. So your role isn't to come and fix a situation, right? What you might try is to consult or teach how it's done. So you might have a little conversation with the traditional camp staff, and I'm going to try it this time. Watch what I do. I'm going to demonstrate it this time, what the approach that I'm suggesting, and then next time I'm going to observe you doing it, and be there to support you if you have any questions and I'll check in with you afterwards. So that's the approach we would want to take, rather than just come in, solve the problem, and move away. You're not really helping them to build their confidence that they can can deal with this on their own. And here's another tip for inclusion staff or TRs, is to offer to, hey, yeah, sure, now you've got this down pat. I've just been called to help out with this group. I'm going to step back. I'm going to take over. Do you want to handle the situation with Sarah? Okay, you handle that situation. I'll take care of your group. So you don't always have to be taking care of the inclusion stuff. You can support the group by helping to support the group and letting that staff build their confidence by working one-to-one with that individual to help them. All righty. And then the option, here it is, again, assist with the rest of the group rather than always being the one to solve the problem with the individual that might be struggling. Our next one, we want to build in learning into your day-to-day work, right? You might, I said, let's do staff training. You might have a camp staff training, and that's wonderful. But it doesn't end there. And it's really important to continue the learning process for everybody. So you may share a tip of the week at staff meetings, right? And I always suggest to folks, and you are most welcome to do this, follow me on social media. I'm constantly putting up new content, little ideas, funny little memes, right? Putting those up, educational memes, and you can share that, right? Maybe here, oh, I just grabbed a tip here, right? Or jump on National Inclusion Project, all their wonderful resources. Grab a tip, a suggestion, right? Just one little thing a week and share it at a staff meeting and maybe ask, like, let's talk about this one, okay? Build it in so that it's culture, not a checkbox item. Maybe you ask somebody, you notice that somebody from the red group did a fantastic job with the situation yesterday, and you ask them to share, hey, Miranda, do you mind sharing about that, right? And then they have the opportunity to boost their self-confidence and be seen as a leader, and now everybody else is seeing this is the expectation. Okay. Another way that you could share, maybe you're doing that at a staff meeting, maybe you post something, if there's a common bulletin board, you put up a meme or a quote or something that just gets people thinking about it, right? Maybe you send around an email or a video that is really impactful. Those are ways we keep the learning going. All right, our next one, we want to learn from successful programs, especially if you're new and you're struggling, you're not quite sure how to make this work. And this would address the hurdle of, I'm not trained, we can't do this or that. Or perhaps you don't have that background experience. You're not certified rec therapist, a therapeutic rec person. You are, just a camp counselor or a staff at your local Y or rec program that's interested in this. But we can learn, right, from each other. So ask a staff from another town or program to come share, come talk, right? Talk to us all, maybe join one of our director meetings or all staff meetings and share what's working with them, right? So, and that could also be internally or externally, sometimes with bigger organization. Maybe aquatics programming is like, nail it, they're getting this all done. And then you have, another group, maybe group X or youth sports, right, that's struggling with this. Have one of your department come speak to another department to share how they're doing it well, right? Raise up those great examples, tell those stories. Perhaps you could observe a class or event where inclusion is working. That's very helpful, not just for yourself, but sometimes for the staff who struggle with this. It might be like, hey, would you like to come Saturday? We have a swim class. It'd be really cool for you to come observe it. I think you'll learn a lot about seeing inclusion work, right? All righty. So then we still have that, another hurdle. This doesn't work, right? Remember that kid 2 years ago? And it just doesn't work. It's not meant, we're not meant to be an inclusive program. You still may have skeptics out there, right? So what we want to do is show what's possible. And how do we do this? We find the success stories and share. So if you're feeling like we don't have any success stories yet, share from another organization. Until you do, you start building them up. And you know what? If you ask around, you have more than you know. There's more success stories there, but we have to show what's possible. All right. And that's by telling stories. The power of a parent testimonial can be unbelievable too. I remember when one of our first camps was struggling a bit. One camp was doing really well at our Y, one not as well. Just a lot of naysayers and skeptics. And we brought in a parent to speak, parent that had success in an inclusive situation for their child. And woof, that was powerful. It brought some people to tears, and some attitudes changed right after that, hearing from a parent or an individual themselves if they're old enough and want to share. All right, so our goal here is to build up empathy. Right. To follow organizations also, here's another tip, that support disability community. So if you start following them, you're just going to have more stories to draw from, perhaps, right? And then if you don't ask, you don't know, but there's a very good likelihood that on your staff team, there could be somebody here who's dealt with it personally, right? Either themselves as having a disability or grown up with a disability, and or they have a family member. And sometimes I've had some really impactful stories that are like, oh, blow me away, when someone shared, thank you for doing this, Lisa. Can I share you my experience, right? Or my sister, my brother, or my family member. And those are powerful. So use those to help sway those skeptics that might be struggling. All right, and just a couple final tips here. We're rounding up here on getting your staff team on board and why we want to do this. All right, we always want to be in that growing mode. So understand that the American with Disability Acts ourselves. That'll help us to become more knowledgeable and reach out for more information on that. Always a good idea to track numbers. You might just be starting out, or maybe you've been doing it for 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10 years, who knows, right? But to show the impact and how your program is supporting more folks and more families, right? And more people signed up, which is dollars, which might have a better impact for some of our leadership who are looking at it in that lens. Okay, so track your numbers and see how you're doing, how many more families are impacted, how many more staff are trained and are able to be part of the team, the all-encompassing team. Always have a wish list. I love this suggestion, came up in a conversation once, that, in case a big grant comes along and like, okay, oh, wow, we have this amount of money, but we have to do this, and that. Have that wish list kind of lined up and pull it out of your back pocket and be able to roll with it and get support to continue your inclusion initiative. All right, hopefully that was helpful, looking at all of those different hurdles and how we can overcome them. And if there was a hurdle I missed or a suggestion that you're thinking of that didn't come up today, I'd love to hear that. I think you are now the third audience to hear this presentation, so it's relatively new and I'm still kind of percolating it up. So I would love to add in your feedback. Another place here, what's your next step? What did you learn through this presentation? What's your takeaway, your aha moment, right? Maybe an action point. What are you going to do differently moving forward? So I want to encourage you, please bring these to the upcoming discussion session that I will be hosting, and you can check in with National Inclusion Project Power Play for that. And just a final note to please feel free to connect with me, right? I'd say let's start by going on mergeconsulting.org, signing up for my monthly newsletter. I would love to be connected with you that way, or connect with me on social media and LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And right there on the bottom left hand is my link tree, and that'll get you to all of these social media pages, my website, and some podcasts that I've done, and other resources that are free and available for you there. So I invite you to be connected with me there. Of course, reach out with an email or phone call if I can help you with anything. And thank you to Amanda and the whole team at National Inclusion Project for providing this tremendous opportunity for all of us in the world, all us inclusion peeps who are trying to make our world more accessible and more inclusive, and a world where everybody belongs. Thank you.